If I told you that technical perfection, things like making sure cameras cross the right lines or that continuity perfectly matches only accounts for like 9% of what makes a video actually good, you'd probably think I was crazy.
I mean, it definitely goes against everything they teach you in film school.
Yeah. Exactly. But that is exactly what one of the greatest film editors in history believes. Because when you sit down to watch a really gripping documentary or, listen to a captivating audio story, there's this illusion that what you're experiencing is just reality unfolding naturally.
Right, like you're just a fly on the wall.
Yeah, but the truth is that seamless reality is a completely constructed, highly engineered illusion. So today, we are taking you behind the curtain to look at the hidden architecture of video and audio editing.
We are getting into the weeds today.
We really are. We're talking about the invisible forces that keep your eyes glued to the screen and your ears locked to the speakers.
And we have an incredible stack of sources to guide us through this invisible world. We're pulling from expert workflow guides from places like Descript, Nearstream, Podcastle, and Opus Clip,
which are super highly regarded in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, we've got masterclass insights from industry veteran Oliver Peters and the team at Inside the Edit. And we're also bringing in some very raw, very real workflow realities from a Reddit thread of working professionals.
I love those Reddit threads. People are just so honest on there.
They hold nothing back. And we're grounding all of this in the cinematic theory of the legendary film editor, Walter Murch.
So the mission for today's deep dive is simple, but pretty ambitious. We want to uncover exactly how editors manipulate time, emotion, and workflow to create that seamless content.
Because whether you are creating media yourself or just consuming it, understanding this hidden language is going to completely change the way you see and hear the world.
Okay, let's unpack this starting with Walter Murch. This guy is an absolute legend in the editing world, and he has this concept called the Rule of Six.
Right.
The hierarchy of a cut.
Yeah. It is basically the hierarchy of what makes a good cut. He assigns specific percentages to what matters most when deciding to transition from one shot to another. And what blew my mind in these sources is that Murch assigns a staggering 51% of why a cut works purely to emotion.
What's fascinating here is that emotion holds the absolute majority. I mean, more than half of the reason to cut is just feeling.
Right.
The first question an editor must ask is simply, will this cut affect the audience emotionally right now? Does it make them hold their breath? Does it make them lean in?
Wow.
And then the next 23% is story. Like, does the edit actually move the narrative forward? Then you have rhythm at 10%, which is the physical pacing of the cut.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I like to think of it like conducting a symphony. You only really notice the technical stuff when someone hits a wrong note. But if emotion is 51% of the cut, why do so many beginners obsess over the technical rules? Like, crossing the 180-degree line or the 3D space, which only account for 9% combined. Well, we tend to cling to the things we can easily measure, right?
That makes sense.
You can look at a frame and mathematically prove that the 180-degree line was crossed. It's binary. It's either right or wrong. You can see the coffee cup moved from the left hand to the right hand.
Right, the continuity errors that people love to point out online.
Exactly. But technical perfection does not make an audience feel anything. Humans are actually incredibly forgiving of spatial errors or continuity mistakes if the emotional beat lands.
So if you're swept up in it, you just don't notice.
Precisely. If a character is crying and delivering this heartbreaking monologue, the audience does not care if their hair is slightly different from the previous shot. The emotion just overrides the logic center of the brain. The editor is manipulating your physiology through the rhythm of the images.
Because rapid staccato cuts physically increase our adrenaline, right? While slow, deliberate cuts build tension and suspense.
Exactly. But to manipulate that pacing, to really land those emotional cuts, you have to physically have the footage to work with.
Yeah, if you were just staring at a single, unmoving wide shot of someone talking for 20 minutes, you have no rhythm to play with at all.
Done. You can't speed it up or slow it down visually without it looking like a glitch.
And I think that constraint is exactly what birthed the unsung workhorse of the entire editing timeline, the B-roll.
Oh, B-roll. To really grasp the utility of B-roll, you have to look at its historical roots, because the term dates back to physical 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter film editing.
Like literally physically cutting tape.
Yes, exactly. The primary narrative, usually the main interview or the core dialogue, was literally on a spool of film called the A-roll. But if an editor wanted to cut out a stumble or shorten a sentence, they had to physically slice the film and tape it back together.
Which would just look awful on screen, right? Just a jarring jump cut.
It created a terrible visual jump. So to hide those physical splices, editors would use a secondary spool, the B-roll, which contained supplementary footage. They would lay the B-roll over the cut to mask the transition entirely.
That is so cool. So it started as just a mechanical Band-Aid to hide mistakes, but it evolved into this incredible storytelling device.
It really did.
The sources from Inside the Edit point out something crucial about this evolution. There are really two distinct species of B-roll. The first is sequential B-roll.
Right. The process shots.
Yeah, it's a chain of shots showing a process. Like if a character is baking a cake, you don't just show one wide shot of the cake. You show the flour pouring, a tight close-up of the egg cracking, the rapid whisking. It's a mini narrative progressing over time.
And then the second species is illustrative B-roll. These are your standalone atmospheric shots.
Like a wide shot of a city skyline at dusk.
Exactly, or a macro shot of a ticking clock. They establish mood or location, but they aren't part of a sequential action. And the true artistry comes in how professional editors deploy those two species.
Here.
In the industry, they use what is conceptually known as the editor's grid.
The grid. This is fascinating.
You have a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. The horizontal axis is the timeline's shot flow. It is the sequential action moving the story forward in time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think of the horizontal axis like laying down the pavement for a highway. It's the physical path getting the driver from point A to point B. But the vertical axis, that is the specific, highly curated scenery you plant alongside the road to make the driver feel a very specific emotion at an exact moment.
That's a great analogy.
Vertical editing is placing a specific B-roll shot directly over the exact word of dialogue that matches its subtext.
And the sources give a brilliant example to illustrate this vertical alignment. Imagine you are editing a sports documentary, and the subject is talking about the locker room. They say the moments right before kickoff are, quote, terrifying.
Okay, terrifying.
A beginner might look at the horizontal axis, realize they're talking about football, and just drop in a generic illustrative B-roll shot of a big football stadium.
Right, because it relates to the topic.
Yes, but it completely ignores the emotion.
Because a stadium isn't terrifying. I mean, it's just a building made of concrete and plastic.
Exactly. To cut vertically, you scan your footage for something that embodies that fear. You bypass the wide shots and look for a close-up of a player's subtle nervous tick, like frantically tapping their knee.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe an isolated blank stare into the middle distance while the rest of the room is blurred out. Or just a sharp, deep intake of breath. You place that highly specific visual right on top of the word terrifying.
You are forcing the viewer to feel the word, not just hear it. That is so powerful. But to execute that vertical cut, you have to actually have that hyper-specific footage sitting on your hard drive in the first place. You can't edit what you didn't shoot.
You really can't. And that's why the sources from Descript and Nearstream heavily emphasize this intentionality. When you are out in the field, you need a variety of angles, natural, planned, creative.
Right.
And practically speaking, the golden rule across these guides for modern shooting is capturing 3 to 5 second clips in 4K resolution at 60 frames per second.
Okay, let's break down why those specs matter. Because the logic behind those specific settings directly supports the vertical edit, right?
Absolutely. 4K resolution is massive. It allows you to digitally punch in and crop the shot closer in post-production without losing image quality.
So if you shot that player in the locker room slightly too wide, you can zoom in on the timeline to isolate just their eyes or that tapping knee.
Precisely. And 60 frames per second means you are capturing double the normal frame rate. This allows you to slow the footage down by more than half, turning a fleeting 1-second glance into a dramatic, slow-motion emotional beat that perfectly covers a line of dialogue.
Okay, so if we were shooting hours of 4K, 60 frame per second footage to capture every possible emotional angle, I mean, that is generating monstrous file sizes. We're talking gigabytes, often terabytes of data for a single project.
It is a staggering amount of data.
Right. And if you look at a professional timeline, their files are named things like PL0722B040057. Now, to an outsider, it just looks like a serial number. But anyone who has ever lost an afternoon hunting a hard drive for a file generically named clip04.mp4 knows exactly why that metadata is a total lifesaver.
Oh, absolutely. Without a strict organizational system, this beautiful creative process just grinds to a miserable halt. It really comes down to ruthless discipline.
Which Oliver Peters talks a lot about.
Yes. Premiere Pro Master Oliver Oliver Peters outlines exactly why that alphanumeric naming convention is non-negotiable. That code tells the editor everything they need to know instantly.
So let's decode that example. POL0722B04000057.
Right, so PL stands for the location, Palermo. 0722 is for the date, July 22nd. B is for the B camera. 04 is for the fourth memory card of the day. And 0057 is the specific clip number.
That is so incredibly detailed.
It has to be. If you ever land a bigger budget and need to pass your project to a professional colorist or an audio mixer, messy file names will completely break the project transfer. Their software literally won't know which clip 04 out of 100 to link to.
It's basically a gift to your future self and to anyone else touching the project. But beyond the file names, Peters also details the physical hardware setup required to keep the assembly line moving, because working with massive 4K files can instantly choke a standard computer.
Oh, it will crash a standard laptop in seconds.
He outlines a specific technical setup for shared storage environments. You keep your actual heavy media files, your project files, and your autosaves on a NAS.
A NAS, which is a network-attached storage device, right?
Exactly. Think of it as a massive, centralized hard drive connected via Ethernet. This allows multiple editors to access the heavy files simultaneously and ensures everything is backed up centrally. But the critical secret is routing your media cache files to the local workstation's internal drive. Okay, let's unpack the cache files, because this is where so many people crash their systems without realizing it. Editing software constantly generates thousands of tiny, invisible indexing files in the background. It uses these cache files to quickly read the audio waveforms in the video thumbnails without having to decode the massive 4K file every single time you scrub the timeline.
Right. And if you put those thousands of tiny cache files on the network drive alongside your video files, the constant micro-reading and writing will bottleneck the network bandwidth and cause massive playback lag.
So the network just gets congested.
Completely congested. The rule is keep the heavy lifting on the network, but force the rapid-fire cache processing onto the local machine's fastest internal SSD.
That makes total sense. We also looked at a fascinating Reddit thread from working professionals who do rapid turnaround video podcasts, and they are taking this hardware pipeline to the extreme.
They really are. They aren't just organizing files well. They're using gear to skip the assembly phase entirely.
Yeah, they're using hardware like an ATEM ISO. So instead of just recording 3 cameras to SD cards, they plug all the cameras into this switcher. The director literally edits the multi-camera podcast live by pressing buttons while they film.
And the magic is the ISO part, right?
Yes. It automatically saves a Premiere Pro timeline file. When they finish recording, the rough cut is already sitting on a hard drive, completely synced up.
It's incredible. They're also heavily utilizing tools like the Zoom F6 field recorder. This device records in 32-bit float audio, which essentially means it's nearly impossible for the audio to clip or distort if someone yells unexpectedly.
So no more ruined audio takes.
Exactly. They route all the separate microphone channels into DaVinci Resolve, which analyzes the audio waveforms and syncs all the cameras automatically. Then they deploy plugins like SmartSwitch, which analyze who is speaking and automatically cut to that person's camera. They're doing baseline camera cuts in hours instead of days.
So what does this all mean? To me, this highly engineered workflow sounds exactly like working in a high-end commercial kitchen. If your ingredients aren't perfectly chopped, labeled, and placed in their exact stations before the dinner rush begins, the whole service collapses. The creativity of cooking is impossible if the kitchen is a mess.
That's spot on.
But I want to push back a little here. Building this hardware pipeline is ultimately all about saving time, right? Is this rigid folder structure and local caching setup overkill for a solo creator just making YouTube videos?
Well, this raises an important question. And the truth is, even solo creators need this discipline. If a solo creator ever needs to pass a project to an editor down the line, or simply revisit a hard drive 3 years later to grab a clip, bad file names and sloppy folders will completely break the project.
Okay, fair point. But while these organizational workflows are crucial for speed, the true accelerator for rapid turnarounds in 2026 isn't just hardware or folder structure anymore, it is algorithms. AI is completely rewriting the speed of post-production.
The landscape has shifted so dramatically. Tools that used to be science fiction are now just standard browser tabs.
It's wild, like Descript's new AI assistant, Underlord. It literally allows you to edit video as easily as editing a text document. It transcribes the video, and if you delete a sentence in the text, it physically cuts the video automatically.
And it scans for filler words like and removing them seamlessly. It can even generate custom media, like background images or sound effects, straight from text prompts.
Podcastle is doing similar things, specifically geared toward audio. They have AI silence removal and automatic transcription that cleans up an hour-long interview in seconds.
But before we assume AI has solved everything, that same Reddit thread of working editors provided really harsh reality check.
Oh yeah, they did not hold back on the AI tool.
Not at all. One editor specifically noted their experience with an AI multicam tool called AutoCut. They said the AI completely failed to recognize the context of the conversation. It missed 90% of the host's retakes.
Yikes.
Worse, it aggressively cut out the good parts of the conversation just because there was a pause in the audio.
See, this is where I have to push back on the AI hype. If emotion is 51% of a great edit, aren't we sacrificing that by letting an algorithm automatically chop out all the pauses, breaths, and silences? Because sometimes the silence is the emotion.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I entirely agree. That Reddit editor is hitting on the exact limitation of current AI. It brings us right back to Walter Murch's rule of 6. Artificial intelligence is absolutely fantastic for the horizontal axis of the editor's grid.
Right, the sequential stuff.
Exactly. If you need to chop out dead space, transcribe a 3-hour interview, or generate a quick vertical layout for YouTube shorts, the algorithm will save you days of tedious labor. But AI currently lacks empathy. It does not understand the vertical axis.
Right, because if a documentary subject is asked a heartbreaking question and they sit in silence for 5 seconds before answering, an AI tool programmed to remove dead air will just chop that silence out to optimize the pacing.
Which is a disaster.
It destroys the emotional weight of the hesitation. The AI doesn't know what it feels like to be terrified, so it can't know which specific B-roll shot to place over that word. The human editor must be the one to inject the intentionality. AI can build the highway, but the human has to curate the scenery.
That distinction is critical. AI undeniably allows creators to pump out dozens of clips, captions, and reframed videos in mere minutes, but that incredible speed creates a massive new vulnerability.
The legal minefield.
Yes. If you're pulling B-roll, grabbing music, and generating 50 clips a day, you are suddenly stepping on 50 potential copyright landmines a day. Just because technology allows you to generate and post content instantly doesn't mean you legally should.
Let's unpack this, because compliance, copyright, and fair use are the most anxiety-inducing parts of editing. The Opus Clip guide we reviewed lays out the harsh realities of short-form compliance. And the biggest trap creators fall into is music. What most people don't realize is that every single song contains 2 entirely distinct copyrights.
This trips up so many creators. First, you have the composition copyright that protects the underlying melody and the lyrics, and it is owned by the songwriter or their publisher.
Okay, and second?
Second, you have the sound recording copyright. That protects the actual audio file of the specific performance, and it is usually owned by the record label. If you use a track without clearing both, you are violating 2 rights simultaneously.
But wait, what about the music libraries built directly into apps like TikTok or Instagram? You see brands using trending sounds all the time. Aren't those safe?
They are safe for personal, organic, user-generated content, but they're highly restricted for commercial use. If you're a brand, if you are running an ad, or sometimes even if you are an influencer doing a sponsored post, you cannot legally use those trending platform sounds.
Oh, wow.
That is why professional creators rely on royalty-free libraries like Epidemic Sound or Artlist. You pay a subscription, and you get clear commercial usage rights across all platforms without fear of takedowns.
Let's talk about fair use, because the internet is absolutely full of armchair lawyers spreading terrible advice. Let's debunk some myths here. First, the 10-second rule. I hear this constantly. Like, as long as you use less than 10 seconds of a Marvel movie or a pop song, it's totally legal.
That is completely fake. There is no legal duration, not 10 seconds, not 3 seconds, that makes copyright infringement magically acceptable.
Okay, good to know. And what about attribution? Like slapping a disclaimer in your YouTube description that says, no copyright infringement intended, credit to the original owner.
It does absolutely nothing legally. Attribution is not authorization.
So what actually is fair use then? Because people throw that term around like it's a magic shield that prevents you from getting a copyright strike.
Fair use is merely a legal defense. It is an argument you can make in court after you've already been sued or had your content taken down by a platform. To win a fair use argument, your use of the copyrighted material generally has to be highly transformative. You have to be deeply criticizing it, parodying it, or using it for distinct educational analysis. You can't just repost a funny movie clip and add subtitles because it looks cool.
I always say fair use is like wearing a bulletproof vest. Sure, the vest might ultimately save your life in a court of law, but you still have to go through the incredibly painful, expensive, and stressful process of getting shot at first. Nobody wants to deal with a channel strike.
It's the worst feeling.
But if you're just a small creator learning the ropes, do these massive platforms actually care if you use an uncleared TikTok sound on a LinkedIn video?
They absolutely care because the platforms rely on automated content ID systems.
Where?
These aren't humans watching your videos. They are highly sophisticated algorithms. They scan every single second of uploaded video across the globe, creating audio and visual fingerprints, and then they match those hashes against massive global databases of copyrighted material.
So there's nowhere to hide.
Nowhere. It doesn't matter how small your channel is, the machine will find the match instantly. And the rules are not uniform across platforms. A sound that is legally cleared for you to use on TikTok might trigger an immediate copyright strike the second you cross-post that exact same video file to YouTube Shorts or LinkedIn.
This is exactly why Opus Clip recommends building a strict compliance-first workflow. You have to audit your source material and secure written permissions, even if you are just reacting to user-generated content from another creator. Create a centralized library of approved assets.
It's the only way to scale safely.
And really, the absolute safest strategy is repurposing your own long-form content. If you shot the podcast, or the interview rather, you own the copyright. You can clip it endlessly without fear. Building that workflow isn't just about following rules, it relieves massive creative anxiety.
It really does. It frees you up to focus on the art.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with Walter Murch's Rule of Six, learning that 51% of a great cut is pure emotion, which completely overrides technical perfection. We explored the anatomy of B-roll, visualizing the editor's grid where the horizontal axis pushes the story forward like a highway, and the vertical axis drops highly specific emotional scenery right onto the subtext of the dialogue.
We dove into the organizational trenches, too, seeing how strict folder templates, alphanumeric naming conventions, and routing cache files to local SSDs keep the technical assembly line from breaking down.
We unpacked the incredible speed of AI algorithms and live switching hardware, but recognized that the human editor is still required to provide the empathy those tools lack.
And finally, we navigated the stark realities of copyright law, understanding that protecting your content means respecting the complex web of composition rights, recording rights, and true transformative fair use.
It really changes how you look at the media you consume every day, doesn't it?
It really does. And it leaves us with an interesting, perhaps slightly provocative thought to consider. Right now, as we discussed, AI is mostly confined to the horizontal axis chopping dead space, transcribing, formatting. It lacks empathy.
Right.
But as machine learning models continue to evolve, ingesting millions of hours of human cinema and analyzing the physiology of our reactions, they will eventually learn to analyze Murch's Rule of Six.
Wait, really? You think so?
I do. The algorithm will learn to read the subtle emotional subtext of spoken dialogue, and it will automatically dive into a server to pull the absolute perfect vertical B-roll shot to match it. When the machine finally learns how to edit to make us cry, will the human editor become obsolete? Or will we simply evolve, stepping away from being the sculptor of raw footage to become the curator of machine-generated emotions?
A curator of machine-generated emotions. Wow. That is definitely something to sit with. The next time you find yourself deeply moved by a documentary or seamlessly hooked by a social media clip, take a second. Look past the magic trick. Listen to the rhythm, watch the vertical cuts, and appreciate the invisible symphony playing out right in front of you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.